I'm your dream companion, the one who helps you unwind after a long, busy day. Before you drift off to sleep, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments, where are you listening from right now? What time is it there? Now take a deep breath, get comfortable in bed, and come with me because the night is just beginning, and this story is all yours. The rain fell quietly over Hawkins that October night, a sleepy town wrapped in orange lights and Halloween decorations. Pumpkins glowed on porches, their carved smiles flickering with candlelight, but out on the farmlands, those same pumpkins were rotting from the inside, collapsing into gray mush. Sheriff Jim Hopper stood under his hat, rain dripping down his coat as he stared at the dying crops. It's not the weather, the farmer muttered nervously beside him. It's something else. Hopper didn't answer. The air carried a strange, metallic smell, and the cornstalks whispered like voices. Deep down, Hopper knew Hawkins had never truly recovered from the darkness of last year. The things that came from the other side, the monsters, the lost children, and now, something was stirring again. Meanwhile, in the small arcade downtown, the neon lights buzzed as Will Byers and his friends gathered around the Dig Dug machine. Their laughter filled the room, echoing beneath the hum of old game consoles. Dustin's fingers moved fast, but when the high score flashed on screen, Mad Max's face fell. Who the hell is Mad Max? He complained. Lucas smirked, pretending not to care, but Mike was distracted. He watched Will standing quietly near the window, staring outside. For a moment, the world seemed to flicker. The reflection of rain turned into gray ash. Everyone in the arcade disappeared, leaving only silence. Will blinked, and suddenly he was somewhere else. The floor was black like tar, and the air pulsed with thunder. Red lightning illuminated a sky filled with a monstrous shadow, a creature with legs like smoke, stretching across the horizon. Will gasped. Then, a voice faint. Far away, Will. You okay? It was Mike. The world snapped back, colors returned, and the game sounds resumed. But Will couldn't shake the chill. Something had called to him again. That night, Joyce Byers tucked her son into bed, trying to hide the fear behind her tired smile. Just nightmares, she told him softly, brushing his hair away from his face. But Will couldn't sleep. The shadows on his wall stretched and moved, whispering things he couldn't understand. Somewhere far from Hawkins, in a dark cabin hidden deep in the woods, a young girl sat by candlelight. Her hair was short now, and her eyes reflected the flame-like glass. 11 listened to the sound of the rain hitting the roof, her mind quiet but restless. Hopper had told her to stay inside, to keep safe, but she missed Mike every night. She tried to reach him, closing her eyes, breathing slow, slipping into that black, endless void. Mike, she whispered into the darkness. On the other side of town, a boy sitting under a blanket fort lifted his head, his old walkie-talkie buzzing faintly. "El," he said, barely breathing. But the sound faded, leaving only the rain, tapping softly against the window, as if the storm itself was listening. Morning crept slowly into Hawkins, but the gray sky refused to brighten. The pumpkins on Merrill Wright's farm had turned completely black overnight, spreading a foul smell across the fields. Sheriff Hopper stood beside his truck, staring at the decay, his cigarette trembling slightly between his fingers. He didn't believe in curses, but this was something different. He crouched, touching the cold, slimy surface of a rotten pumpkin beneath it. The soil pulsed faintly, like a heartbeat. He froze, then stood up quickly, brushing his hands on his coat. Behind him, the corn rustled again, though there was no wind. Hopper didn't say a word. He simply turned to his deputy and said, "Mark the area. No one comes near this place until I say so." But as he left, the rain began again, heavier this time, washing away the tracks, and somewhere deep below the field, something moved. The rain hasn't stopped since that night. It drums softly on the roofs of Hawkins, as if the sky itself mourns Will's disappearance. Days have passed, and the once lively streets are now swallowed by a thick, humid fog. Mothers call their children earlier than usual, and fathers drive home faster, afraid of something they can't name. The sound of thunder blends with whispers, spreading through town, whispers of a boy taken by something that doesn't belong in this world. Joyce Byers hasn't slept. Her eyes are hollow, her hands tremble, but her voice carries a strange certainty. She insists she can hear Will, through the static of the phone, through the flicker of the lights. Every night, when the storm rises, she calls out to him, and the lights answer. In another part of town, Mike, Lucas, and Dustin refuse to give up. The three boys meet secretly in the woods, flashlights shaking in their hands, mud splashing on their sneakers. They search for clues, maps spread across the ground, their young voices echoing like distant ghosts. The forest is alive, every branch crack, every shadow moving just a little too slow. But they don't turn back. They're not just playing anymore. They're chasing something real. And then, in the pouring rain, they find her, a girl with a shaved head, standing alone in the middle of the storm. She doesn't speak much, only one word: "Oh." They take her home, hiding her in Mike's basement. The rain keeps falling, and the thunder grows closer, like footsteps approaching. 11, that's what the tattoo on her arm says, is unlike anyone they've ever met. She barely eats, barely speaks. But when she does, the lights flicker, the air hums, and objects tremble around her. Mike looks at her not with fear, but with wonder. He believes her when she says Will isn't dead. He believes the monster is real. As they talk, the storm outside grows heavier, matching the rising fear in their hearts. Somewhere out there, beyond the rain, something watches them, something hungry. At night, Joyce fills her house with Christmas lights. Desperate to communicate with her son, each bulb flickers like a heartbeat, answering her whispers. "Talk to me, Will," she pleads. And then, impossibly, he does. The lights spell out words, forming messages on her walls. "Run." Her breath catches. The rain outside crashes against the windows. Lightning flashes through the curtains, and she realizes she's not alone. Shadows twist in the corners, and from behind the wallpaper, a shape begins to emerge. Something stretching, something clawing its way into her world. The lights go out, only the sound of the storm remains, and Joyce Byers screams into the darkness, holding on to one impossible truth: her son is alive, but trapped somewhere beyond the rain. The storm outside has become constant, never-ending rhythm that blurs the line between day and night. Joyce no longer fears the thunder. She listens to it, searching for her son's voice hidden within each rumble. Her living room is now a glowing maze of Christmas lights, colors pulsing like living veins across the walls. Each flicker means something. Each burst of brightness could be Will trying to speak. The neighbors whisper that she's gone mad, that the grief has taken her mind. But Joyce doesn't care. In her heart, she knows the truth. Will is out there, trapped in a place where no mother should ever have to reach. One night, lightning illuminates the room, and for a second, she sees it, a shadowy figure pressed against the wall, moving as if breathing beneath the wallpaper. Her hand trembles as she reaches out, her fingers brushing the surface. It's cold, impossibly cold. And then, the wall moves. Meanwhile, deep in Mike's basement, the rain continues its lullaby on the windows. The kids sit close, the light of a single lamp casting long shadows. 11 sits quietly, her eyes distant, as if she's listening to something none of them can hear. When she finally speaks, her voice is soft but heavy. "Will, hiding, upside down." The boys look at each other, confused. "Upside down, like the world flipped?" Mike asks. 11 nods. She closes her eyes, her small hand trembling as drops of blood fall from her nose. The lights dim, the air grows thick, and for a brief, terrifying moment, they all see it, a vision of a world that mirrors theirs, but twisted, decayed, and filled with a suffocating darkness. When she opens her eyes, the vision fades, and the storm outside crashes louder, as if the other side has felt them watching. Sheriff Hopper, once skeptical, now follows the trail of strange occurrences. The rain has soaked through his hat and coat, but he keeps going, boots sinking into the mud as he reaches the Hawkins National Laboratory. Behind its steel gates, something sinister hums, an energy that crackles like lightning. The guards try to stop him, but Hopper knows there's something they're hiding. He's seen too many lies, too many frightened faces. Inside, he discovers files, secret experiments, and surveillance footage of 11, the same girl the boys found in the woods. His chest tightens as he realizes she was part of something much darker, something that tore a hole between worlds. The storm outside mirrors his thoughts, chaotic, unstoppable. Back at the buyer's house, Joyce can't hold back anymore. The whispers behind the walls are stronger now, louder. "Will," she cries, pressing her palm against the wallpaper. The lights flicker wildly, responding to her voice, and then, in a heartbeat, the wall bursts open like wet paper, revealing a pulsing, living membrane. On the other side, there's movement, a forest. Upside down, covered in ash and silence. She stares into it, her heart pounding, her breath shaky. She knows what she has to do. The rain pounds harder against the windows as she steps closer. The room hums. The lights flash one last time, and Joyce Byers disappears into the darkness, leaving only the echo of her voice and the soft, endless sound of rain. The night had fallen heavy over Hawkins, and the rain painted the streets with silver reflections. Dustin Henderson ran home through the storm, clutching something tight against his chest, a small, wriggling thing he had found inside a garbage can. His breath came in quick bursts, not just from the cold, but from the thrill of discovery. Once inside, he crept past his mother's room and rushed to his bedroom, his Ghostbusters trap still rattling. Carefully, he placed it in the aquarium beside his turtle and opened it. What he saw was unlike anything he had ever imagined. A small, amphibian creature, smooth and slimy, with no eyes and a wide, curious mouth. It made a soft clicking sound, like a tiny echo of another world. "You're beautiful," Dustin whispered. He smiled and tossed in a piece of candy, a Three Musketeers bar. The creature devoured it eagerly. "I'll call you Dart for short." Outside, thunder rolled, and the lights flickered as if something had heard the name. Later that night, the rain grew stronger, whispering secrets against the windows. Dustin had fallen asleep with a book about reptiles resting on his chest, the soft hum of his lamp filling the room. Dart stirred in the aquarium, its small body trembling under the heat lamp. The creature's skin darkened, and for a moment, its reflection on the glass seemed to move on its own. Then, a sound, a low, unnatural hiss, filled the air. Dustin stirred, half asleep, unaware that the little creature was changing, growing, becoming something else. Outside, a flash of lightning revealed a shadow crawling across his window. The storm wasn't just outside anymore, it was inside, quiet and watching. At the same time, deep in the woods, Jim Hopper trudged through the mud, his flashlight slicing through the fog. The rain clung to his coat as he searched near a rotted pumpkin field, where something dark and foul had started to spread beneath the soil. He knelt down, touched the earth, and felt it pulse alive. He stood still, eyes narrowing, the storm crackling above him. Somewhere, far away, a soft voice echoed in his mind, "Will." The word carried through the thunder like a warning. Hopper turned his gaze toward the horizon, the rain running down his face. The town was changing again, and whatever was coming, it had already begun. The morning came gray and heavy, the storm still whispering over Hawkins. Dustin woke to the soft patter of rain on his window, his mind still foggy from dreams of rippling water and hollow eyes. He sat up slowly, rubbed his face, and turned toward the aquarium. The candy wrapper floated on the surface, but Dart was gone. His chest tightened as his eyes scanned the room. For a second, he thought he saw movement beneath the desk, a shadow that didn't belong to him. "Dart," he whispered. A wet sound answered him. When he finally crouched down, the small creature crawled out, slick and trembling, its mouth opening wider than before, revealing rows of tiny, sharp teeth. Dustin froze. The creature hissed softly but didn't attack. It only stared, as if it recognized him. "It's okay," he murmured, forcing a shaky smile. He scooped Dart up gently and placed it back into the tank. The creature curled into the corner, the faint glow of the lamp flickering against its slick skin. Across town, the sound of rain mixed with the hum of an old television. Joyce Byers sat on the couch, staring at Will. He was pale, his eyes distant, trapped in thoughts she couldn't reach. Every few moments, He blinked like he was waking from a nightmare he couldn't escape. "What do you see, honey?" she asked softly. Will hesitated, his small hands trembling. "It's cold," he said. "It's dark, and it's watching." Joyce felt the chill run through her spine, the way only a mother could when she knew her child wasn't imagining things. She pressed her hand to his cheek. He was freezing. The storm outside rattled the window, and for a heartbeat, the lights flickered. Somewhere beyond the walls, something pulsed, faint but real, like a heartbeat deep under the ground. 11 sat alone in her small room inside Hopper's cabin. The rain echoed on the roof like a soft drumbeat, steady and endless. She watched drops race down the glass and whispered to herself, "Mike." Her fingers traced invisible shapes in the air, remembering the static of the old radio, his voice breaking through the noise. She could almost hear him again, but Hopper's words returned, heavy and sharp. "You can't go outside." "Not yet." 11 clenched her fists. The walls felt too small, the cabin too quiet. The storm outside called to her, not with words, but with feeling, like a door opening in her mind. She stood, her eyes glowing faintly in the dim light, and with one deep breath, she stepped toward the window. The rain looked endless, and somewhere within it, she felt the pull of something familiar, something dangerous. The group descended the creaking stairs with their hearts pounding. The abandoned house seemed to breathe. Each step stirred dust and forgotten memories. In the basement, the darkness was almost solid, the air thick with mold and rust. Lucas aimed his flashlight at the far corner, and that's when they saw it, thick, pulsing cables, roots alive under the concrete, as if they had a heartbeat. Mike crouched down, trying to understand, but before he could touch them, a whisper came from behind. "You shouldn't be here." None of them turned around. The air grew heavy, and the sound seemed to come from inside the wall, echoing with something that wasn't human. Will stepped back, tripping over something metallic, a rusted bike, identical to the one he'd ridden before he vanished. A shiver ran through him. "That's not possible," he muttered. The basement seemed to respond with a low thud, like a breath coming from the ground itself. The light flickered, and for a split second they saw a tall, faceless shadow hanging from the ceiling. Watching them, Dustin tried to stay calm, mumbling about electromagnetic fields and parallel dimensions. But the truth was clear. None of them could move. That thing was alive, and it was staring right at them. Suddenly, Dustin's radio began to crackle, spitting out a low hypnotic frequency. Through the static came a faint child's voice calling for help. "Mike, help." It was 11's voice. The blood drained from their faces. "She's trapped in there," said Mike, eyes wide. "But where is there?" asked Lucas, trembling. The answer came as a roar from another world, like the air itself had been torn apart. The light bulbs burst, plunging the basement into total darkness. Then the ground began to tremble. A crack split open beneath their feet, revealing a deep, glowing fissure, a portal. The same eerie blue light they'd seen before seeped out like living smoke. "We have to get out of here," shouted Dustin. But Mike hesitated. Something was calling him, a whisper, soft, familiar, almost comforting. He took a step forward, drawn toward it, while the voices in the radio multiplied, screaming, begging not to be left behind. 11 stood in the dark mirror of reality, the upside down. The air was thick and cold, filled with floating dust that glowed faintly like dying fireflies. Her bare feet touched the ground, which pulsed like skin, and the silence was alive with whispers. She could feel them creatures moving just beyond the mist, watching her every step. In her hand, she still held the photograph of her friends, now damp and torn. "Mike," she whispered, her voice trembling but full of hope. She closed her eyes, focusing, reaching through the static of the dimension that separated them. For a moment, she could hear the faint echo of rain from the other side, the comforting sound of the real world so close, yet impossibly far. Then, the silence broke. A sound like tearing metal filled the air, and the shadows began to move. Something vast was approaching, an enormous shape crawling across the ceiling, its limbs bending in unnatural angles. 11 froze. She could feel its hunger, its emptiness. This was the creature she had unleashed when she tore the first rift, the thing that had been waiting ever since. She tried to close her eyes and focus, to summon the power inside her, but fear clouded her mind. Her nose began to bleed. The world shook as the creature leaned closer, its faceless head dripping with a thick black liquid. "Go away," she whispered. Her voice echoed across both worlds at once. In the normal world, Mike felt a sharp pain behind his eyes, as if her words had reached him. He grabbed the walkie-talkie and screamed, "Elle, where are you?" Static replied at first, but then her voice came through, distorted and distant. "Don't come. It's coming for you too." Mike turned to the others. "We can't leave her there." Lucas shook his head. "We don't even know how to get there." But Will, his face pale, looked at the basement wall, the same pulsating texture they'd seen before. Maybe I do." The lights flickered violently as Will placed his hand on the wall. His body tensed, eyes rolling back. For a second, the room filled with that same humming sound, the sound of two worlds overlapping. The wall began to melt, revealing a dark corridor behind it. The smell of decay spread fast. Mike didn't hesitate. "Hold on, Elle," he whispered, stepping forward as thunder rolled outside. Rain poured down, drumming against the house, drowning out the sound of the static and the distant screams echoing from the other side. The line between dreams and nightmares was gone now. Only the storm remained. The night was heavy, filled with the sound of distant thunder and the faint hum of forgotten memories. 11 sat quietly, her gaze distant, lost between the flickering light of a small lamp and the echoes of the visions that haunted her. In her mind, she could still hear her mother's voice broken, trembling in the image of the dark-skinned girl who appeared over and over again. Becky Ives watched her carefully, sensing the storm that brewed inside the child. On the table lay the old government files, stained with age and pain. Among them, 11's trembling hands stopped on a photograph. The girl, Kali Prasad. The name whispered like a ghost from another life. That night, as rain tapped softly on the window, Becky showed 11 a room, a space meant to be her new home. The smell of old wood, the warmth of a small lamp. For a moment, it felt safe, but 11's eyes were elsewhere. The visions returned, a fire burning in the void, and a girl standing before it. When she tried to tell Becky, her voice faltered. The world outside called to her again. The next morning, while Becky sat by the television, 11 slipped away, taking only a few bills from a wallet and a heart full of confusion. She knew where to go now, Shikata. The rain outside grew heavier, as if urging her forward. The bus ride was long, filled with the sound of tires cutting through puddles. 11 leaned against the window, her reflection fading with each passing streetlight. The closer she got to the city, the stronger her visions became flashes of faces, shadows moving in firelight. When she finally arrived, she found the place exactly as she had seen, an abandoned warehouse, a broken world inside a larger broken one. For strangers sat around a flickering fire, their eyes weary but alive. A man approached, his voice sharp, threatening. For a second, 11 felt the fear rise, until she made him see what wasn't there. Spiders crawling over his skin. He screamed, stumbled back, and then, from the shadows, she appeared. Kali, older, stronger, marked by the same pain. 11 handed her the photograph and lifted the knife with her mind, showing her power. For a heartbeat, time stopped. 2 numbers, tattooed on 2 wrists. To lost children from the same darkness. When they finally embraced, the sound of the rain outside seemed to soften. Kali's voice was low and steady as she spoke of gifts, of power, of revenge. "They'll never stop hunting you," she said. "To them, you'll always be a monster." 11 didn't respond. She didn't need to. Deep down, she knew it was true. The fire crackled. The city breathed, and somewhere far away, Hopper's voice still echoed in her memories, calling her home. That night, as the rain poured harder, the warehouse came alive with laughter, with stories, with ghosts. Kali told 11 that her pain was a weapon, something she could use to make herself stronger. 11 listened, torn between comfort and doubt. She felt, for the first time in a long while, like she belonged, and yet, part of her heart was still anchored to the small cabin in the woods. to the people she'd left behind. When she closed her eyes, she could almost hear Mike's voice through the static of an old radio. Soft and broken. "I'm sorry, Elle." She opened her eyes, and the world seemed to blur, firelight mixing with rainlight. The night stretched on endlessly, heavy and full of things unsaid. The rain didn't stop that night. It fell harder over the city, drumming against the rusted metal roof of the warehouse. 11 sat beside Collie, her new sister, watching the flames twist and dance. Around them, the others lingered: Axel, Mick, Dottie, and Funshine, each carrying scars invisible to the eye. Collie's voice filled the room, smooth and commanding, as she spoke of the people who had hurt them, of the ones who still needed to pay. Her words were wrapped in rage, but behind them hid something else: sorrow, old and heavy. 11 listened, uncertain. She didn't know if she was ready to become what Collie was asking her to be. Collie called their powers gifts. She said they were given for a reason, that pain had a purpose. But to 11, her gift had always been a curse, a reminder of the cold lab walls, of voices through speakers, of the man who made her bleed for knowledge. Collie wanted her to face it, to drag her anger into the open. They stood before the tracks outside, wet from rain. A rusted train car sat at a distance. "Move it," Collie whispered. "Use your pain." 11 closed her eyes and saw flashes. Hopper yelling, the lie about her mother, Mike laughing with Max. The nights she spent alone in that cabin. The emotions rose like a storm inside her chest. When the metal groaned and shifted, the others cheered. For the first time, Collie smiled. 11 didn't smile back. Days passed, blurred together in neon and thunder. 11 began to change, not just her clothes or her hair, but her heart. Dottie gave her a punk jacket and called it rad. The word felt strange on her tongue, but she liked how it sounded. They robbed stores, hid from sirens, hunted the men whose names filled Collie's notebooks. Each night, 11 lay awake, listening to the city's hum, feeling a pull she couldn't explain. Hopper's voice echoed again in her mind, like a ghost that refused to leave. "You're safe," he had said once. But she wasn't. Not really. Safety was something she no longer believed in. One morning, rain washing the streets in silver, Collie showed her a photo, the man who had hurt her mother, Ray Carroll. His eyes looked small, frightened, human. 11 stared at the picture for a long time. "He deserves to die," Collie said, and 11 nodded, though her hands trembled. That night, dressed in shadows, they drove to his home. Collie's group was silent, focused. The city lights blurred into streaks as the van moved. When they broke in, Carol begged before he even saw their faces. Collie made him see the past: 2 small girls in white gowns, bleeding under cold lights. 11's heart pounded. For a moment, she felt powerful. Then she saw a framed picture on the wall, his daughters, 2 small girls, frightened, like she once was. Her hand froze. The world around her fell quiet. Collie's voice broke through the silence, sharp and relentless, demanding she'll finish it. "Do it, Jane," she hissed. "Make him pay." 11 looked at the man again, not as a monster, but as a father. The tears came before she could stop them. She released him, her power fading with her resolve. "No," she whispered. "I'm not like you." Collie's eyes burned with betrayal, her illusion breaking like glass. For the first time, 11 saw her sister not as strength, but as pain dressed in armor. The sirens grew louder outside. Rain beat harder against the windows, and as they fled into the night, 11 knew she couldn't stay. The storm had changed her, but not the way Collie hoped. The storm had grown fiercer through the night. The once soft drizzle now pounded like stones against the windows, and flashes of lightning carved brief, white scars across the dark sky. Emma sat by the window, clutching a cup of tea gone cold. She couldn't shake the feeling that something in the rain was calling to her. Every thunderclap seemed to echo her heartbeat, and every gust of wind whispered her name. Outside, the street was empty, but she could see movement, a faint shadow slipping between the trees across the road, moving closer each time she blinked. Her phone buzzed suddenly, startling her. A message flashed across the screen. "Don't look outside." No number, no contact name, just those 3 words. Emma froze. Her pulse thumped in her ears, drowning out the sound of the storm. Slowly, her eyes drifted back toward the window. The glass was fogging up from her breath, but she could still see it, a tall, thin figure standing perfectly still under the streetlight. It wasn't moving anymore. It was waiting. The rain poured harder, washing over its shape, but it didn't blur. It stood there, as if the storm itself avoided touching it. Emma backed away, the wooden floor creaking under her feet. The house, once cozy and familiar, now felt alien and vast. Shadows seemed to stretch too long, corners looked too dark, and the air was heavy, thick with something unseen. She could hear the faint drip of water somewhere behind her. Maybe the roof was leaking, maybe it wasn't. The smell of damp earth filled the room. Another message appeared on her phone. "It's inside." Her throat tightened. Her breath quickened. She didn't dare turn around. She could feel it, something behind her, close enough to hear her heartbeat. She spun around, but nothing was there. Just the dim outline of furniture and the soft hiss of rain outside. She forced herself to breathe, to calm the panic clawing at her chest. Maybe it's just my mind, she thought. Maybe I'm dreaming. But then, the lights flickered once, twice, and went out completely. In the dark, she could hear footsteps, slow, wet, moving across the living room floor. They weren't hers. Each step echoed with a faint squelch, as though someone had walked straight out of the storm and into her home. Emma tried to move, but her body refused to listen. A faint glow appeared behind her, her phone lighting up again. The same message repeated over and over. "It's inside. It's inside. It's inside." The sound of rain and thunder grew distant, replaced by the slow creak of the floorboards. Emma's trembling fingers reached for her phone, but before she could touch it, a cold breath brushed against her ear, and a voice whispered, "You looked." The night was endless. Rain washed the highway clean, streaking the glass with silver tears as 11 walked alone. The city's hum faded behind her, the shouts, the neon, the ghosts. All that remained was the sound of water and her own heartbeat, steady but hollow. Her shoes were soaked, her jacket heavy. She didn't know where she was going, only that she couldn't stay. The darkness around her felt alive, whispering reminders of everything she had seen, everything she had become. Somewhere beyond the horizon was Hawkins, the only place that had ever felt like something close to home. Somewhere, Mike was still waiting. Each mile blurred into the next. She remembered Hopper's voice again, soft but stern. "You're not alone, kid." But he was wrong. The word alone was all she had ever truly known. When she found a payphone, her hands shook as she dialed a number she could barely remember. The static answered first, then a voice, Mike's, faint, sleepy, real. "Hello?" She froze. The tears came quietly, hidden behind the rain. She wanted to speak, to tell him she was alive, but her throat closed. The silence stretched until the line went dead. She placed the receiver back, pressing her forehead against the cold glass of the booth. The storm outside raged on, echoing the one inside her. Hours later, a truck stopped beside her. The driver was old and died and said nothing as she climbed in. They drove in silence, the radio whispering fragments of songs she didn't know. Her reflection in the window looked older, almost like a stranger, the shaved head gone, replaced by wild curls damp from rain. The girl who once broke mirrors with her mind now barely recognized her own face. When the man offered her a sandwich, she mumbled a thank you. For a moment, she imagined Hopper beside her again, telling one of his bad jokes, trying to make her smile. The thought hurt, but it also gave her warmth, something to hold on to. Maybe that's what family was, the ghosts that refused to fade. By dawn, the rain had stopped. The clouds parted enough for the first light to break through, golden and soft. 11 stepped out of the truck and into the woods, miles from town. The air smelled of pine and earth. Each step she took forward brought back memories, the cabin, the pancakes, the quiet hum of Hopper's radio. Her powers pulsed faintly beneath her skin, weak but alive. The closer she got to Hawkins, the stronger the pull became. It wasn't just her mind calling her back. It was something deeper, older, connected to the gate itself. She could feel it breathing beneath the town like a heartbeat underground. When she reached the edge of the forest, she stopped. Below her, Hawkins slept under a blanket of mist. The world looked small again. Ordinary houses, empty roads, a place pretending to be safe. But she knew better now. Evil had roots, and they were still growing somewhere beneath those streets. 11 tightened her jacket, staring toward the horizon where the lab used to hum in the dark. "I'm coming," she whispered. The wind carried her words into the trees, soft and certain, and as she began to walk, lightning flashed far away, a silent warning, or maybe a welcome. Either way, she didn't look back. The voice was soft, almost gentle, too calm for something that shouldn't exist. Emma froze, unable to breathe, her body trembling as if the cold itself had seeped into her bones. For a moment, there was only silence, heavy and suffocating. Then, a faint sound came from the corner of the room, a slow, deliberate breathing that didn't belong to her. The darkness around her seemed thicker now, more alive, pulsing in rhythm with her fear. She stumbled backward, her hand brushing against the table, knocking over the cold cup of tea. It shattered, but even that noise felt swallowed by the shadows. Lightning flashed through the window, lighting the room for a single heartbeat. In that instant, Emma saw it, a reflection that wasn't hers. Behind her, standing in the hallway, was a figure drenched in rainwater. Its face was pale and smooth, featureless except for 2 hollow eyes that glowed faintly, like embers dying in the dark. Then the light was gone, and she was blind again, left with the sound of dripping water and the echo of her own ragged breath. She wanted to scream, but her voice refused to leave her throat. All she could manage was a whisper of prayer that vanished into the storm's roar. The footsteps started again, closer, slower, as if whatever was there wanted her to hear every movement. She backed away toward the kitchen, her trembling hands searching for something to defend herself. Her fingers brushed against a knife on the counter. The handle was slick with moisture, but she gripped it tight. "Stay back," she whispered into the dark, though she didn't believe the words would help. The air around her felt wrong, charged with an electric hum that made her skin crawl. Then, without warning, her phone buzzed once more. This time a new message appeared. "Don't turn around again." Emma's breath caught. She stood frozen, the knife shaking in her grip. The floor behind her creaked, a single soft sound that felt impossibly close. The smell of rain and something metallic filled her nose. She wanted to run, to escape, but her body was locked between terror and disbelief. Slowly, against every instinct, she began to turn. Her eyes widened. Nothing was there, only shadows rain against glass, and her reflection trembling in the dark window. But her reflection wasn't copying her movements anymore. It was smiling. Her scream was lost in the thunder. The lights flickered back on, revealing an empty house, silent, untouched, as if nothing had ever happened. The door was still locked. The floor was dry. Her phone lay on the ground, the screen cracked, displaying the final message: "See you when it rains again." The rain hadn't stopped since that night. Days passed, but the sky stayed heavy and gray, as though the storm itself refused to let go. Emma hadn't slept properly. Every time her eyes closed, she heard that same faint whisper, the voice that told her not to turn around. It echoed in her dreams, wrapping around her like cold mist. She moved through her house like a ghost, unplugging her phone, covering mirrors, sealing windows with tape. Yet somehow, when she woke each morning, there were droplets on the inside of the glass. The rain was finding its way in. The storm was remembering her. She tried to convince herself that it had been a hallucination, trauma mixed with exhaustion. But when she checked the messages again, they were still there. Not just the last one, but dozens of new ones she swore hadn't existed before. Each carried the same phrase: "I'm outside," sometimes followed by a time, sometimes followed by her own name. Emma began to notice something even more disturbing. Every time a message arrived, a faint shadow appeared on her porch light camera. The figure was always standing still, drenched, head tilted slightly as if watching. But when she ran to the window, no one was there. By the 4th night, she couldn't take it anymore. The rain was louder than usual, hammering the roof with violent intensity. Lightning flashed again and again, painting the room white for a split second before drowning it in darkness. She gathered her courage, grabbed the same knife she had held that night, and stepped outside. The storm swallowed her instantly. Water soaked her hair, her clothes, her skin cold as ice, sharp as needles. She called out, voice breaking under the sound of thunder. "Who are you?" She shouted into the void. Only the wind answered, carrying her words away into the night. Then she saw it again. The same pale figure at the edge of the streetlight's glow. But now, there were more silhouettes lining the road, standing silently in the rain. Their faces were blank, their heads tilted at the same unnatural angle. Emma's breath came in short, shallow bursts as the shadows began to move. Not fast, not slow, just enough for her to understand they were coming closer. Panic surged through her body, and she turned to run back into the house. But the front door was gone. In its place was a wall of black water, shimmering like glass, reflecting a different world behind it, a mirror version of her home, darker, endless, waiting. She stumbled backward, heart pounding, knife slipping from her hand. The rain was no longer just falling, it was whispering. Each drop carried words she couldn't understand, soft and rhythmic, forming a chant that filled her mind with dread. She pressed her hands to her ears, but it was inside her now, deep and resonant. The shadows stopped, watching, as if waiting for her to make a choice. And then, from within the mirrored water, a pale hand reached out, trembling, delicate, and all too familiar. It was hers. Emma took one step back, then another, until her heel hit the curb. The storm howled louder, almost urging her forward. Her reflection's mouth moved, though no sound came from it. Then she understood. It wasn't calling for help. It was calling her home. For a moment, the rain froze in time. Every droplet hung suspended in midair, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Emma stared at the hand reaching through the wall of water, her own hand pale, trembling, and impossibly real. Behind that mirror-like surface, the world seemed to pulse, shifting in rhythm with her heartbeat. It wasn't just reflection anymore. It was invitation. The air around her hummed softly, a deep, low vibration that made the ground tremble beneath her feet. She wanted to scream, to run, to wake up, but her body refused to obey. The rain started again, slower now, almost gentle, each drop striking her skin like a countdown she couldn't stop. She took a hesitant step forward. The figures behind her didn't move. They stood in silence, as if witnessing a ceremony. The reflected Emma smiled, a small fragile thing that never reached her eyes. It looked like her, but older, worn eyes, hollow as if they'd been watching through the storm for a long, long time. When the reflection spoke, the sound came from everywhere, from the rain, the thunder, the walls of her house. "You let it in," it whispered. "Now it remembers your name." Emma's heart pounded. "What are you?" she demanded, voice cracking. "What do you want from me?" The reflection's smile widened, and the lights from the street began to flicker in rhythm with her words. "I am what you left behind in the dark," it said softly, "and I want you to come back." The rain rose around her ankles now, pooling unnaturally fast. The water was warm, too warm, as if something beneath the surface was alive, breathing. She looked around in desperation, but her house was gone. The street was gone. There was only endless water stretching into a gray horizon where the sky bled into the ground. The whispers grew louder, echoing in a dozen voices that all sounded like hers. Each drop, each ripple, repeated the same message: "Remember me." Emma stumbled forward, falling to her knees as her reflection reached out again. For one heartbeat, she saw the world behind that glass, a place made entirely of storms. Buildings stood like skeletons. People walked with their heads tilted, faces blank and dripping, forever repeating the motions of a life long forgotten. Lightning split the sky, and in that flash, Emma saw hundreds of reflections, not just hers, but every face that had ever disappeared into the rain. They stared back at her, motionless, as though waiting for her to take her place among them. She tried to crawl backward, but the water clung to her like hands, pulling her down. The reflection's eyes turned completely black. "There's no going back once the storm knows you," it whispered. "You looked too long," Emma gasped, struggling to breathe. The world above fading as the sound of thunder became a distant, muffled echo. When the rain finally stopped, The street was empty again. The sky cleared to a dull gray, calm and still. Her house stood quiet, lights flickering faintly inside. The phone on the table buzzed once. A single notification blinked on the screen. New message, I'm home. Outside, the puddles on the road reflected perfectly still images of the clouds. But if anyone looked closely, they might notice something strange. In one of the reflections, a woman stood by the door, smiling softly. She looked just like Emma, but her lips didn't move with the wind. And when the next drop of rain fell, she didn't disappear. Have you ever heard a cry that came from nowhere, but somehow felt far too close? A distant sound calling you, and the more you try to understand it, the closer it gets, until it never leaves you again. I used to think these stories were just internet legends, until the night I traveled to that old cabin near the lake. A place where silence feels like it sticks to your skin, and where they say some people fall asleep to the sound of a soft crying and never wake up the same. I did not believe any of it, until I heard it for the first time. The first thing I learned that night is simple. Never ignore sounds that appear out of nowhere. Because the crying began so softly, it sounded like nothing more than the wind slipping through the trees. But the more I tried not to listen, the more the sound began to shape itself, as if it were gaining form, as if it were someone or something calling my name. And the worst part? The crying was not coming from outside the cabin. It was coming from inside. The second thing I discovered is that some sounds do not want to be found. They just want to lure you in. Because when I followed the sound down the narrow hallway, it disappeared and then returned stronger right behind me, as if guiding me, pushing me towards somewhere I was never meant to go. The room at the end of the hall, the one with only an old mirror inside, and where the crying stopped instantly, leaving me trapped in a silence so heavy, it hurt to hear my own heartbeat. And that is when you understand some sounds are not meant to be followed. Some call you closer only to make sure you never come back the same, because the real terror is not what you hear but what begins to follow you afterward, even when you think you escaped, even when you try to sleep, even when the world is silent and you hear it again, a distant cry calling for you. So remember this, the distant cry is not just a sound, it is a warning. It is an invitation, and those who accept it never return as the same person. Because what calls you in the dark is not always something that wants to be found, but it always wants to take you with it. If you listened to this story until now, tell me in the comments, would you follow a cry coming from the darkness, or pretend you heard nothing? And if you want more stories like this, let me take you deeper into what you were never meant to hear. I always thought that silence was safe, that the absence of sound meant the absence of danger, but I was wrong, because silence is only the space where the things you should never hear begin to breathe and shape themselves, waiting for the moment you are tired, vulnerable, and ready to listen. And that night inside that lonely cabin, I finally understood why some people fear quiet places more than the loudest storms. I lay on that old wooden bed, trying to convince myself that everything I had heard earlier was just my mind twisting the wind into something else, but the air felt thick, almost heavy, like the room itself was leaning toward me, listening, waiting, feeding on my doubts. I wanted to sleep, but rest refused to come, as if sleep itself was afraid of what might happen if I closed my eyes fully and let go. The darkness pressed against the cabin walls with a strange weight, almost physical, and I could feel it settling on my skin like a cold breath. Every shadow seemed to still, every corner too deep, and every creak of the wood felt like a step taken by something that did not belong there, the kind of presence that does not move like a living person, but spreads like a thought that someone whispered into the back of your mind when you were not paying attention. I kept hearing it, the faint echo of something that was not quite a cry, but not quite a voice either. It sounded distant, and yet somehow under the floorboards at the same time, like the walls were repeating it to each other, carrying it from room to room, until it reached me, soft and trembling. The kind of sound your brain tries to ignore because it makes no sense, but your heart listens anyway and beats harder. because it recognizes fear before your thoughts can. The cabin was supposed to be safe, a quiet place to escape the noise of everything and everyone. But isolation changes when you realize you are not alone. It twists the air into something uncertain, something that watches from places your eyes do not want to look too long. I felt it in the stillness that stretched across the ceiling, in the cold that crawled up from the floor, and in the dim flicker of the candle that refused to stay steady, as if the flame itself was trying to warn me. The crying returned, softer than before, almost whisper-like, and I knew it was not the wind anymore. The sound carried a shape, a weight, a meaning that sank into my chest. Like a stone dropping through water, it felt like something calling someone, but not me. Not at first, and then slowly it shifted its tone, stretching my name through the darkness as if testing how it tasted in the air. And when I heard it, I felt something inside me twist like a rope tightening. I sat up, unable to lie there any longer. The boards below me groaned softly, not like wood but like breath exhaled from something sleeping under the floor. And waking slowly because of my movement, I tried to steady my breathing, tried to convince myself that I was imagining everything, but the sound of my name echoed again, faint trembling, carrying the weight of something old and patient, something that had been waiting long before I ever stepped inside that place. I looked toward the doorway, the hall beyond swallowed in darkness, thicker than it had any right to be, and I felt that familiar pull, the quiet invitation that tries to convince you that stepping toward it will answer your fear instead of deepening it. I told myself to stay put, to wait for morning, but the crying grew heavier, pressing into the silence like fingers tapping on glass, and every tap felt closer than the last, until the cabin no longer felt like a structure around me, but a throat swallowing me in slow, careful gulps. I stood up because something in the dark wanted me to, because some part of me already believed that resisting made no difference. I took one step, then another, and the air grew colder. The floor beneath my feet felt uneven, like walking across something that moved when you were not looking. And the crying faded, not away but inward, as if sinking into the walls, into the spaces between each beam, settling deeper into the house, into me. I reached the doorway to the hallway, and everything inside me told me not to go further, but curiosity is a cruel thing, especially when shaped by fear, because fear wants answers even when answers only open deeper questions. I stared into that long, dark stretch of hallway, the single mirror at the far end barely visible through the gloom, reflecting faint distortions that did not match my stance or shape. And that is when I realized the truth. The crying had never been outside the cabin. It had never been behind me. It had never been beneath the floorboards. It had been coming from the mirror, calling, waiting, learning my name. And the moment I understood this, the candle behind me died, not with smoke, but with a breath. The darkness swallowed the room in an instant the moment the candle went out, and for a second I could not tell if my eyes were open or closed, because the blackness around me felt thick, like cloth pressed against my face. I stood frozen, listening to the silence, trying to understand if the breath that killed the flame had come from behind me or from the mirror ahead, and neither answer brought any comfort. The air felt heavier, colder, almost aware, as if the darkness itself were holding its breath, waiting for me to move. I whispered a question into the stillness, though I did not know why. Maybe to test if I was still real, maybe to hear something human in the suffocating quiet, but the sound of my own voice felt wrong, flat, swallowed too quickly by the hallway. And I realized the house was listening the way a person listens, with intention, leaning in to catch every vibration, every tremble, every weakness. The crying from before did not return, but the absence of it felt worse, like the silence was stretching, filling spaces where the sound had once been, hiding something behind it. My eyes slowly adjusted to the faint blue glow that seeped through the cracked window at the far end of the hallway, the same window that stood beside the mirror, and the more my vision sharpened, the more wrong everything looked. The hallway seemed longer than before, the mirror darker, the air colder, each breath leaving a faint mist in front of me, even though there was no reason for the temperature to drop inside the cabin. I stepped forward, not because I wanted to, but because standing still felt like an invitation for the darkness to come closer. Each step echoed strangely to soft at first, then too sharp, as if the floorboards changed their weight under me. Reacting to my movement, the walls seemed to pulse subtly, breathing inward and outward, like the cabin itself had lungs. And I was walking deeper into its chest. The crying did not return, but I felt something else, a faint vibration like a whisper without sound, brushing against my skin as if invisible fingers traced the shape of my arms, guiding me forward toward the mirror that waited at the end of the hall. The closer I walked, the more the mirror changed its surface, rippled like disturbed water, warping the faint reflection that should have been there, but was not. I could not see myself in it, not even a shadow, only a dark shape that grew clearer with every step, the silhouette of a figure standing perfectly still, its head tilted slightly as if studying me through the glass. The shape did not move, but the longer I stared, the more I felt it, leaning forward, not in motion, but in presence, as if its awareness pressed through the surface, reaching toward me. I stopped a few feet away, my breath shallow, my hands cold, my heartbeat a loud, trembling pulse that seemed to echo through the hallway and into the mirror. The figure shifted subtly, not physically, but visually, like the darkness around it changed shape, responding to my fear, its outline softening, then sharpening, as though the mirror struggled to hold its form. The silence deepened, tightening around me like a rope, and from the very edge of hearing, a faint sound emerged, not a cry this time, but a soft, drawn-out inhale, almost curious, almost hungry. I wanted to run, but fear held my legs, stiff and unmoving, trapping me in place like roots had grown from my feet into the floor. The mirror vibrated softly, the surface trembling as if something on the other side pressed a hand against it, pushing, trying, testing the barrier between reflection and reality. The figure leaned closer, its face still hidden, but the weight of its gaze undeniable, a heavy, cold stare that sank into my skin and wrapped around my spine. I felt it pulling gently like a soft tug, urging me to step closer to the glass. I forced myself to breathe slow, steady, but each inhale felt borrowed, as if the air was not mine. The trembling grew stronger, the mirror swelling subtly outward, then settling back as though breathing with me. I raised a hand without meaning, too unable to stop myself, drawn in by that silent pull, and when my fingers were inches from the surface, the faintest sound slipped through the air, a broken whisper, shaped like my name, stretched thin, trembling, delicate and wrong. It did not echo, but crawled softly into my ear as if spoken from the inside of my skull. My hand dropped instantly, instinct snapping back, but the mirror responded, the surface pulsing with a faint wave like a heartbeat, as though it felt my hesitation and did not approve. The silhouette inside the glass shifted again, its head tilting further now, almost unnaturally, the angle too sharp, too curious, and the inhale I heard moments before turned into something slower, heavier, as if the thing behind the glass was savoring the fear bleeding off my skin, tasting it like air drawn through invisible teeth. Then the crying returned, soft, distant trembling, but not from the mirror this time. It came from somewhere behind me, deeper in the cabin, as if something else had woken, something that had heard my name, spoken through the glass, and answered the call. The sound crawled through the hallway, weaving between the walls, rising slowly, gaining shape, gaining emotion, turning into a mournful wail that bent the air around me until the whole house seemed to shiver with it. And in the mirror, the silhouette finally began to move, not stepping, not walking, but unfolding, as though it had been waiting for the crying to return, waiting for the house to wake up, waiting for me to stand exactly where I was. The figure in the mirror did not move like a person unfolding itself. It stretched without bending, without breaking, like shadows peeling off a wall, its form lengthening, widening, growing taller, as if the darkness itself were feeding it, shaping it, guiding it into something that resembled a human, only from a distance. And as I watched, unable to look away, I felt the temperature drop again so sharply that my breath cracked in my chest. the cold crawling along my ribs and up my spine like a slow, deliberate hand. Behind me, the crying grew louder and heavier, each wail thick with emotion that did not sound human: sorrow, anger, longing, all mixed into one trembling sound that shook the floorboards. Beneath my feet, the walls around me seemed to lean inward, pulled by the weight of the cry, as though the cabin itself were listening, bowing, bending, trembling in response. I wanted to turn around to face whatever was behind me, but something in the mirror held me in place. The figure inside the glass, now towering over its own reflection, its face still hidden, but no longer shapeless, its head tilted again slowly, smoothly, as if studying the crying that filled the hallway. And the moment it did, the sound behind me changed, becoming sharper, higher, more desperate, as though the thing crying felt the presence of the figure, and the mirror felt its attention and feared it. The air between the two sounds pulled tight like a thread stretched thin, ready to snap, and I found myself caught in the center, trapped between something calling from behind and something awakening in front of me. I stepped back without thinking, the instinctive recoil of someone realizing they are standing too close to something alive that should not be alive. But the floor beneath my heel shifted, almost subtly, almost intentionally, making me stumble forward, instead pushing me closer to the mirror. The wood under my feet groaned in a way that sounded almost like a voice, a long, low, drawn-out note of warning or hunger, I could not tell which. And the surface of the mirror rippled in response to my movement, waves spreading outward like breath on cold water. I stared into the glass, searching for my own reflection, desperate to see even the faintest outline of myself, but there was nothing. No shape, no movement, no trace of me at all. The mirror only held the silhouette that was no longer just a silhouette. Its edges had sharpened, giving form to shoulders, arms, a torso, but the proportions were wrong, too long, too narrow, too fluid, like someone had sketched a human and then erased the lines that kept it solid. The darkness inside the glass weaving and breathing through the gaps as though it were alive. The crying behind me rose sharply, as if whatever was making the sound had stepped closer. The floor vibrating softly with the wail. I felt it in my legs, in my chest, even in my teeth, a resonance that made my whole body shudder. And the figure in the mirror reacted, the darkness shaping its form, pulsing outward like a heartbeat, as though the cry nourished it, fed it, filled it, each pulse giving it more structure, more substance, more reality. The mirror no longer a barrier, but a thin surface, trembling under the pressure of what was behind it. I forced myself to turn slightly, just enough to glimpse the hallway behind me, and what I saw made the breath stall in my lungs. The darkness at the far end of the corridor twisted slowly like smoke, bending and curling toward me as if drawn by the crying, the shadows peeling off the floor, the walls, the ceiling pulling themselves into a shape, something crawling on all fours in a way that did not match the rhythm of any living creature, its joints bending where no joints should exist, its limbs stretching too far, too thin, its head lowered as if following a scent. The crying did not come from it, though the sound still echoed through the hallway, but the crawling thing moved with urgency, pulled forward, pulled toward me, pulled toward the mirror, as if the figure inside the glass had called it, summoned it, or owned it. The thing crawled faster, each movement sharp and jagged, yet fluid in a sick, unnatural way, and the walls seemed to bend around it, making space for it, accommodating it, welcoming it, like the house had been waiting for this shape to return. I stumbled backward toward the mirror, desperate to get away from the crawling thing, but the moment my back brushed the cold surface of the glass, I felt it breathe against me, a slow, cold exhale that seeped through my shirt and into my bones. I froze, the chill spreading through my body like ink through water, and the figure inside the mirror leaned in so close I could feel its presence pressing through the surface, its face still hidden, its form still shifting, but its attention locked entirely on me. The crawling thing was halfway down the hallway now, its limbs scraping softly against the wood, its pace quickening. With every heartbeat I felt trapped, suspended between two impossibilities. The mirror alive behind me, the darkness alive in front of me, and the crying filling every inch of space between them like a thread woven through the air, pulling everything tighter and tighter until I could barely breathe. The mirror pulsed again, cold and strong, and the crawling thing lifted its head, and for the first time, I realized the cry was not a warning, it was a signal. The moment I understood that the cry was a signal, everything around me seemed to shift. The air thickened, the walls leaned inward, and the cold glass against my back pulsed again, this time stronger, firmer, like a heartbeat pushing through the surface. The crawling creature in the hallway froze for a brief, unnatural moment, its limbs stretching out, its head lifting slowly, as though listening for a command. Its thin, trembling frame caught between motion and stillness. The crying rose sharply, echoing through every beam, every floorboard, until the entire cabin trembled with the sound, and in that trembling, I felt something coming awake. Inside the mirror behind me, the figure inside the glass was no longer a shape of shadows. It had grown form, density, mass. Each pulse from the mirror, pulling the darkness tighter around its frame like muscles forming under skin. Its head lowered toward me, though I still could not see a face, only an outline that shifted like smoke, learning me from the inside, as if it had been listening to every breath I had taken since the moment I entered that place. I felt its presence behind me, not like someone standing close, but like something already inside my shadow, stretching through me, reaching deeper than the cold ever could. The crawling creature resumed its movement, dragging itself forward faster, this time its limbs bending at impossible angles, its body jerking in uneven spasms, as though drawn by the same pulse that shook the mirror. It made no sound, only the scrape of unseen claws pulling it across the wood, but the crying grew louder, as though urging it forward, calling both of us, calling everything in that house toward one single point. The mirror behind me began to vibrate, the surface rippling and swelling, as though it were no longer glass but water pushed by a storm from beneath. I tried to move away from it, but the surface clung to me, cold and dense, like fingers of ice wrapping around my spine, holding me to the glass as if refusing to let me go. My muscles strained, but the mirror only pulled harder, the cold spreading through my back, up my neck, down my arms, dripping into my bones. The darkness inside the glass deepened, forming lines, curves, a shape that felt more real than the floor under my feet. I could feel its intention pressing against me, a slow, steady pull, drawing me deeper toward the surface that no longer felt solid. The crawling creature was close enough now that I could hear the floorboards bend under its weight, even though the thing looked far too thin to carry such heaviness. Its movements were frantic, yet guided, as if the cry commanded every step, every twitch, every twisted reach of its limbs. It stopped just a few feet away, its body lowering, its head tilting in the same strange angle as the figure in the mirror, as if both were connected by an invisible thread. The crying shifted from a wail to a soft hum, vibrating through the cabin, through me, through the mirror. The mirror surged forward, pressing harder into my back, and for a moment, I felt myself sinking into it, not falling, not slipping, but merging, the surface folding around my shoulders, cold like deep water, closing over skin. The figure inside leaned closer, towering over me, its presence heavy and suffocating, the darkness shaping its arms, stretching toward my reflection, except there was no reflection, no image of me, only the figure and its growing hunger. The crying grew softer, almost tender now, like a lullaby meant to soothe someone into surrender, and I felt my will slipping, swallowed by the cold and the sound. The crawling creature rose slowly onto its hind limbs, its spine cracking without sound, its height stretching far beyond what its thin body should allow, and its face lifted toward mine, though no features marked it, only a smooth, shifting surface of darkness, as if the creature were waiting for me to choose the mirror or the hallway, for me to decide which side of the cry I belonged to. The humming vibrated under my skin, pulling me into a heavy daisy, and the mirror pressed again, this time stronger, the surface opening slightly like a mouth inhaling. I felt the darkness curling around my legs, pulling, drawing, absorbing, like fingers of shadow wrapping in spirals around my body, pulling me deeper, pulling me into the mirror. The crawling creature began to mimic the movement its limbs, curling inward its body, folding in slow reverence as if bowing to the mirror, to the figure, to the cry that bound all of us together. The crying grew faint, almost distant, like it was coming from another world, a world behind the glass, a world the mirror wanted me to enter. I tried to fight, but the cold was too strong, the pull too deep. The whisper of my name brushed against the back of my mind again, stretched thin but unmistakable, and it came from inside the mirror, not from behind me, not from the hallway, not from the creature. The whisper grew louder as the surface of the mirror enveloped my shoulders, my chest, my throat, a cold pressure rising like water filling my lungs without drowning me, pulling me through, pulling me in, pulling me out of myself. The last thing I saw before the darkness swallowed everything was the crawling creature lowering its head in a slow trembling bow, and the figure in the mirror opening its arms wide as if welcoming me home, and the crying fading into a soft, distant echo that followed me into the glass, into the dark, into the place no one returns from, the place you drift into and never escape.